When I was a little girl, I had an eye I had a crossed eye. You've seen kids with their eye that goes in, and I had to wear a patch on my eye. And I was different because I had this patch on my eye. And the patch was to make the weak eye become stronger. And so I wore a patch, and this eye became stronger and stronger. But I wore that patch for about 2 years. And there were some days when I would come home and I'd lift the patch and there'd be water in it because I'd been crying because kids had been mean to me. But it taught me something. Over time, I got over it, and I wore it very confidently because I knew that there was an end in sight. And so I think a certain amount of independence and not being unhappy if you look different or being perceived as being different is something that's important. You know, because artists are different and they are nonconformists, and that's what makes them creative. And so I think that issue of being okay with a patch. And what else? Also, drawing all the time. I drew constantly. They used to know when I was at my mother's desk because I used to do a daisy, and there would be daisies all over the place. And they said, "Oh, Madeline's been there," you know. Also, being okay with being by yourself, because being creative requires concentration. It requires your ability to be okay in your head by yourself using your imagination. And so you need quiet and you need space. And sometimes even in the midst of chaos, you can find a creative space. If you live in a house with lots of people, lots of noise, lots of music, sometimes being creative allows you to block it all out and do your creative thing. So I came from a noisy family. There were 5 of us. Also, I was an excellent salesperson from a little girl. I sold newspapers. And my brother had a newspaper route. And one year, he went to camp and he gave me his paper route. Well, my brother was very gregarious and very talkative, and he would go and he would talk to the people, and, you know, he'd leave the paper and said, "Oh, I'll get your money later, don't worry about it." And he'd go along and he'd be out on his paper route all evening. When I took over the paper route, I was about the business of selling newspapers. It wasn't a social activity. So I would knock on the door. My family had a newspaper called the Afro-American newspaper. So I'd knock on the door. Afro. They'd open the door, reach out for the newspaper, and I'd say, "Collect." And they'd say, "Well, Billy always left the paper. I'll pay you next week." I said, "No, I can't leave the paper until you pay." And I turned to leave, and they said, "Well, wait a minute, here's the money." And I'd leave the newspaper. So I did this over and over and over. He had all kinds of clients that weren't paying him. I couldn't understand it. By the time he came back, everybody had paid their bill. But when he came back and he went back out, they'd say, "Oh, Billy, we're so glad you're back because your sister's mean." And of course, they stopped paying him. But knowing how to value your work and knowing that you deserve to be compensated for it. And often when you're an artist, there will be people who say, "Oh, you did that so fast. That's so easy. Oh, you should give that to me." Or, "Oh, that's too much money." Knowing the value of your creativity is very important. So those are the things that and I did note cards too when I was a kid. And I'd sell note cards. You know, I was always selling something. But I used my creativity as a way of creating, you know, income. And so you can do that. You can use your creativity and make a livelihood.